It has been reported that the Chicago Bulls front office want to make some trades, but they don't want to go into a rebuild. So the question for today is, are the Chicago Bulls making the good decision by not wanting a rebuild? Y'all know we're going to talk about it, break it down, but you got to hear the music first. Cognac. Gang. Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's episode of Shy Boys Podcast. If you're tuning in with me today, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, it was reported by Jake Fisher that the Chicago Bulls are pretty much looking or willing to trade Zach LaVine, but they don't want to go into a rebuild. So are the Chicago Bulls making a good decision by not wanting to go into that rebuild? And I'll start off with one side of the discussion. That's the rebuild. The rebuild. We can go ahead and launch it, but that's going to come with many costs that a lot of Bulls fans might not like. And I'm pretty sure that the front office might not like as well, because the front office, in my opinion, they view a lot of the players that's currently on this team as being valuable pieces to trying to hold up that competitive edge that the front office has been preaching, that continuity that they've been preaching about for the last few seasons. Now, I know that some of the players that might come up, obviously, is going to be Zach LaVine, but if you wanted to launch into this rebuild, you would imagine that it won't be only Zach LaVine. It's going to be Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and possibly Nikola Vucevic included in that. And I think that when we talk about it, if you want to go ahead and move Zach and move DeMar, is going to have to come at the cost of some other players being thrown in there. Maybe a Zach LaVine and Caruso. We've seen that many, many times. And sometimes when I see some of those trade machines get cranked up and they push out trades that include Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso, the return is just not good enough. I seen one example was with Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso for D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, and a couple more players from the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't know if I'm willing to give up all that for a guy in D'Angelo Russell right now. Rui Hachimura is not a bad player, but then you're not really recuperating anything when it comes back to the assets that you feel like you should be getting, because the Lakers don't have many assets right now. And let's just say you go ahead and you look to move DeMar DeRozan. Will it just be DeMar DeRozan? I don't think so. Simply because he's on an expiring contract, so you have to look at that. And then the want from the other team as an insurance, so they might try to look at garnering one of your young players. Kobe White, maybe Patrick Williams, somebody like that. Ayo Dosunmu might have to get thrown in there and things like that. Now, if y'all was telling me that, hey, we can go ahead and give DeMar DeRozan and Javon Carter for somebody, Pete, but I don't see that happening. I see that Javon Carter has been struggling this season. So it's a lot of things that you have to consider when you want to say, let's blow this thing up, because you don't just want to take anything back. And I believe that most of these players that has been pushed out into, the trade rumor mill per se, a lot of it just not matching up. I know it's always going to be somebody who favors a little bit more on the winning side when you make trades, or sometimes there are times to where you can get something in return that's pretty even. But as of right now, that pretty even trade hasn't been placed out there, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? And those assets that I feel like the front office hold dear to their heart, I feel like Nikola Vucevic is one of them. Alex Caruso is another. P. Will is definitely one of them, for all the things that we heard last season, that a lot of teams was reaching out to the Chicago Bulls, and the Chicago Bulls didn't budge. And then I wonder how valuable they view Kobe White as well, with his progression and how he's been looking and how he's been moving forward. And I know when it comes to these rebuilds, a lot of people's like, just load up on the picks. But then I also got to point to teams like the Wizards, the Detroit Pistons, the Charlotte Hornets. They've been having picks for years, but yet they continue to still be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Like it's been very, very dark over there for those three teams within the conference, that you would hope that they would have been, moving up the ladder a little bit even though they have all the assets, been in the lottery multiple seasons and still can't find consistencies, in with amongst their teams to where they can compete and produce at a decent level, not let alone a high level. So you got to continue, because you got to continue to evaluate and look at all those things, because you can load up on a draft picks, but yeah, I don't. Do we trust the front office to draft well? Because right now it seems like it's a bit iffy. It's coming along. It's coming along. But there is, a few questions that you might have when you say, hey, let's load up on the assets, and then we can probably, get the next great thing in Chicago, the next Derrick Rose, the next Michael Jordan, or something like that. And that's not always the case for most organizations and franchises. That's just not what it is. So it sounds pretty damn good to say, let's go on a rebuild. You know what I'm saying? Let the young kids cook. But I also have to ask the questions. If you let the young kids cook, which young kids will be a part of the team? Like, do you do anything at all costs to just make sure that you keep Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, and P. Will? And then you lose all your veterans in that, or the other guys that's supposed to be helping stabilize the team to establish some type of structure? Would the Chicago Bulls be winning with just a lineup of Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, and P. Will with a few throw-ins? I don't know. That's a tough decision that the front office will have to make. But I'm on the other side of not going into the rebuild. So the Bulls not wanting to go into the rebuild, it makes a lot of sense for me. I believe it makes a lot of sense to me because the current investment into this roster. I know that you can always move players. You can always move things. But there's a reason why the Bulls signed Kobe White to a 3-year deal. And the way that he's been playing, that's going to be a steal. That's going to be a bargain. That's going to be a deal that pays for itself, because I believe Kobe White so far has exceeded all expectations for this season, and he's going to continue to do so moving forward. Then you look at Nikola Vucevic. You know what he can bring to the team. I understand there has been discussions when you talk about Andre Drummond and bringing him on and he can somehow be the starter and all those things. But I just feel like there are limitations to his game, just like any other player. But I feel like in today's NBA, if you want to be dynamic enough on the offensive side, you got to have a big that's similar or close to Nikola Vucevic. And then the other investments is obviously Zach LaVine. So I feel like if you don't want to go, you can still trade him, but not go into the rebuild. That investment was there, and you want to make sure that you return you want to get something in return that can help your team for the foreseeable future. Hence why I will back off of any trade that the Lakers want to give me, because the assets wouldn't match up. I don't know if D'Angelo Russell will be all right. Matter of fact, I'm going to take it back. Lakers, we might consider D'Angelo Russell if you want Javon Carter. We might consider D'Angelo Russell if you want Javon Carter. I could deal with inconsistent play from D'Angelo Russell, because I know there's going to be some games to where he lights it up and he can give you a dub. I haven't seen Javon Carter get close to a dub unless I miss something, and I don't have much confidence that he will have a game with 20 plus points. It can happen. I can be wrong. And y'all always say, see, Bobby, I told you. But as of right now, I just don't see it. But I also think that the investment into the current roster doesn't allow for the Chicago Bulls to be a bottom feeding team. So I think they still want to be a competitive team. I still believe, even though if they're not that top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, they still want to be able to put a product out there that makes the playoffs. I understand that's not good enough, Bulls fans, but I'd rather be watching Bulls basketball than to watch Bulls get 8 wins in the season. I'm just saying. I know we got to pick our poison when we talk about these things, because they can go either way. And another reason why I believe that the not wanting to go into the rebuild, it makes sense to me, because I don't want to give up on my young talent. I still don't know what Kobe White's ceiling is. I still don't know. I do know that the future is bright, and we can see that he's making moves in the right direction. I still don't know what Patrick Williams is going to be. But before the injury and he went down, he looked pretty damn good and looked like he was starting to establish himself and become a more consistent player. I still don't know what I want to do with Ayo Dosunmu. You know what I'm saying? I still don't know, what it is, but I know that he's been a solid rotational player and a role player for this Bulls team. He's a versatile guy that you can put in many situations, small ball situations. He can go ahead and hit the three at a competent level. He could defend. He can go ahead and attack the basket, going down lane, especially in transition. So I don't want to give up on that talent. I don't want to give up on Alex Caruso for pennies on the dollar. I don't want to give up on, Nikola Vucevic. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to give him up for nothing. I don't want to give him up for anything. And the reason I bring all this up is because when we talk about trades, the contracts have to match. This is not the NFL, the way you could say, yeah, we're going to trade you this high-paid player just for a first-round pick. It don't work like that in the NBA. You have to match contracts. That's why I say when you go into trade talks, let's just say you move Zach LaVine first. If you include it, you might have to include another player in that. And then if you want to move DeMar DeRozan, you might have to include more players in that for the team accepting DeMar DeRozan on his expiring contract. They need reassurance. And then it might come with a cost of giving up assets as well. We need our assets. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're getting an absolute game changer that can come through that door. That's what it really comes down to. And I think that the rebuild also makes sense to me in my mind is because if you load up on all these assets, I believe there'll be more misses than hits. There has been more misses than hits in most cases, unless you got an outstanding scouting department and you know how to properly evaluate talent. It can get difficult when it comes to drafting these type of players, especially with it being discussion that, this year and possibly next year, the landscape of prospects is not as strong as some other years. It's still being talked about, but you can always find players. But right now, that build up or that lead up to believing that some of these players can come in and be an impact player right away is just not, something that I will bank on. So I think that's something that you got to consider as well. And then I also think that veteran leadership is one of the keys to making sure that you build a winner. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that if the Bulls go in and launch that rebuild, I mean, you can keep some of the veterans around. It might be nice. It might be cool. But with the balance right now of young players with veteran players is kind of even in some way. And I believe that leadership has been helping the young Bulls kind of branch out and start to blossom a little bit. And I believe that you should be able to keep that around, or at least want to keep that around, so your team can continue to grow. Your young players can continue to grow, but there is a stabilizing force, i.e. in the veterans, that can help maintain and win ball games to where you're not at the bottom of the Eastern Conference like the teams I mentioned before. So the Bulls not wanting to go into the rebuild makes sense to me. Hence why, because I don't want to sit on and watch a 2.5-hour Bulls game of just absolute trash. We've done it this season and we all lost our minds in October, November. We were losing our shit. And do y'all want to prepare for 2-3 years of that? I don't know. I don't want to sign up for that. That's just me personally. I don't want to sign up for a team that's just moving along. Give me a team that's going to be a little bit more competitive, even though we already know they're not a championship contender, but they can contend for the playoffs. I know that some will be like, well, is that all we're playing for? Is that all we're playing for is the playoffs? I would agree with you. No, that shouldn't be the only thing that we're playing for. But I also believe that the way that you get to the promised land, which is the NBA finals, is that you have to continue to add and build, not subtract. I mean, there will be some that say, hey, but you are adding assets. I understand you can have assets in the bag, but you need players to play to get results. That will be my counter. You got to get players to play to see results, and not just any players. You need stars. You need valuable role players. You need good coaching, which is a big question. We ain't going to get into that, though. But you need a lot of things to be aligned so you can be a championship contender. You know what I'm saying? So I want to continue to see these guys to retool, not rebuild for the future. That's what I want to see. Continue to retool, build this thing up. If Zach LaVine is still on the table, you make a move for him. Try to just keep it about him and then see what type of return that you can get versus trading Zach, trading DeMar, including other guys within those trades that might take more away from your team than add to your team. That's just me. But that's it for me. Y'all let me know down below. How y'all feeling about this? Are the Chicago Bulls making a good decision not wanting to rebuild? Or do you think they should absolutely rebuild and say, screw the players? We can be bad for a couple years and we'll be just fine. Let me know your thoughts on all that. I have my thoughts. Now it's time to share yours. But hey, that's it for me today. Make sure if you tuned in today, you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to call in and leave a take, the voicemail line is 773-242-9219. This is another episode of Shy Bulls Podcast. I'm Bobby. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure. Cognac. Gang.